The ocean roared, a restless beast clawing at the shore, as Eli stumbled over the dunes, his heart pounding louder than the waves. He was 19, barely a man, yet tonight he felt like he was running from something ancient, something he couldn't name. Behind him, the man he'd known his whole life, his dad's best friend. Jack walked with a steady stride, his silhouette cutting through the moonlight like a blade. Eli's sneakers sank into the cool sand of the Oregon coast, the air sharp with salt and the ache of secrets. He'd agreed to this road trip on a whim, a break from the suffocating routine of his small-town life in Idaho. Jack, 35, rugged and unshaven, had always been the cool uncle figure, beer in hand, quick with a joke, the guy who taught Eli how to change a tire and sneak into concerts. But this trip, this endless stretch of highway and coastal towns, had started to feel different. Eli couldn't shake the way Jack's eyes lingered on him when he thought Eli wasn't looking. It wasn't predatory, it was something softer, heavier, like a question neither of them dared to ask. They'd been on the road for 2 weeks, hopping from one sleepy beach town to another, sleeping in Jack's beat-up van or cheap motels when the nights got too cold. Eli's dad, Tom, had laughed when Jack offered to take Eli along. "Get the kid out of his shell," he'd said, clapping Jack on the shoulder. Tom trusted Jack with his life hell. They'd been friends since high school, bonded over fishing trips and late-night poker games. Jack was straight as an arrow, or so everyone thought. Eli thought so too, until that first night in the van when Jack's hand brushed his while passing a water bottle, and the air between them crackled like static. Tonight, they'd set up camp on a secluded stretch of beach, the kind of place where the world felt like it ended at the horizon. The fire they'd built sputtered in the wind, casting flickering shadows on their faces. Eli sat cross-legged on a blanket, poking at the embers with a stick, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. Jack was sprawled out beside him, nursing a beer, his flannel shirt unbuttoned just enough to show the edge of a tattoo Eli had never noticed before, a compass, faded but deliberate, inked on his chest. "You ever think about running away?" Eli asked, his voice barely audible over the waves. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was the beer he'd snuck earlier, loosening his tongue. Maybe it was the way Jack's silence felt like an invitation. Jack tilted his head, his green eyes catching the firelight. "All the time, kid." His voice was low, rough, like he was confessing something. "But where do you run when you're already out here?" Eli's breath hitched. He wanted to ask what Jack meant, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he stared at the fire, watching it dance, feeling the weight of Jack's gaze like a physical touch. The truth was, Eli had been running his whole life not from home, not from his dad, but from himself. He'd known he was gay since he was 14, but in a town where different was a dirty word. He'd buried it deep. He'd dated girls, played football, done all the things a normal guy was supposed to do. But Jack was different. Jack made him feel seen, and that scared the hell out of him. The night stretched on, the fire dying to embers. Jack stood, brushing sand off his jeans. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the water. "Let's walk." Eli hesitated, then followed, his heart hammering. The beach was deserted, the moonlight painting the sand silver. They walked in silence, the only sound the rhythmic crash of waves and the crunch of their steps. Eli's mind raced every glance. Every brush of Jack's arm against his felt like a spark. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt too big, too dangerous. Jack stopped suddenly, turning to face the ocean. His shoulders were tense, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Eli," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I need to tell you." Eli froze, his pulse roaring in his ears. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The ocean, and the truth hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Jack's words hung in the air, heavy as the salt-soaked breeze. Eli's heart thudded so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. He wanted to run, to dive into the ocean and let it swallow him whole. But his feet stayed rooted in the sand. Jack didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the horizon, where the moon bled silver into the water. "I've been carrying something for a long time," he said, his voice rough, like he was dragging the words up from somewhere deep. "And I don't know how to say it without screwing everything up." Eli's mouth went dry. He wanted to ask what, but his tongue felt like lead. Instead, he stood there, the cold sand seeping through his sneakers, waiting for the world to shift. Jack finally turned, his face half-shadowed, his eyes searching Eli's like he was looking for permission. "I'm not who you think I am," he said. "I'm not. I've never been the guy your dad thinks I am." The words hit Eli like a punch. He'd spent years watching Jack laughing with his dad, flirting with women at bars, playing the part of the rough-around-the-edges straight guy. But there'd always been something else. Something in the way Jack's smile faltered when he thought no one was watching. Something in the way he'd linger a beat too long when their eyes met. Eli had told himself it was nothing, just his own desperate imagination. But now, standing on this empty beach, he wasn't so sure. "What do you mean?" Eli managed, his voice barely a whisper. Jack ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. "I've spent my whole life pretending. Eli. Hiding. Your dad. This town. This whole damn world, they expect you to be a certain way. And I played along because it was easier. But I'm tired. I'm so damn tired." Eli's heart lurched. He took a step closer, the space between them shrinking to nothing. "Jack, what are you saying?" Jack's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. "I'm saying I'm like you." The world stopped. Eli's breath caught, his mind reeling. "Like you." He'd never said it out loud, not to anyone, but Jack knew. Somehow, Jack had always known. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Eli wanted to say something, to ask how, why, when, but before he could, Jack turned away, his shoulders hunching like he was bracing for a blow. "Forget it," he muttered. "I shouldn't have said anything. Let's go back." "No." Eli's voice was sharper than he meant, cutting through the night. He grabbed Jack's arm, his fingers digging into the worn flannel. "Don't do that. Don't walk away." Jack froze, his breath ragged. For a moment, neither of them moved, the ocean's roar filling the space between them. Then Jack turned, and the look in his eyes fear, longing, something achingly human made Eli's chest ache. "I've been lying my whole life," Jack said, his voice breaking. "To your dad, to myself. But being out here with you, it's like I can't lie anymore." Eli's hand was still on Jack's arm, the warmth of his skin seeping through the fabric. He wanted to pull away, to run, but he couldn't. Not now. Not when Jack was looking at him like that, like he was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. They stood there, caught in the gravity of the moment, until Jack took a shaky breath and stepped back. "We should get back to camp," he said, his voice barely audible. This can't happen." But as they walked back, the air between them buzzed with something new, something dangerous. Eli's mind was a storm of questions about Jack, about himself, about what this meant for both of them. He didn't know if he was ready for the answers. But one thing was clear, there was no going back. The fire was dead when they returned to camp, just a pile of ash and charred driftwood. Eli's hands shook as he zipped up his jacket, the cold biting deeper now. Jack busied himself with the cooler, pulling out another beer, but his movements were stiff, like he was trying to outrun his own words. Eli sat on the blanket, staring at the embers, replaying Jack's confession in his head. I'm like you. It was a lifeline and a landmine all at once. He'd spent so long hiding who he was, convincing himself no one would ever understand. And now Jack, of all people, was standing on the same edge, teetering between truth and fear. You okay? Jack's voice broke the silence, low and cautious. He was sitting now, a few feet away, the beer untouched in his hand. Eli nodded, but it was a lie. He wasn't okay. He was terrified, exhilarated, alive in a way he hadn't been in years. How long? He asked, his voice barely steady. How long have you known? Jack let out a bitter laugh, staring at the sand. Since I was younger than you. But knowing and doing something about it, that's two different things. Eli's chest tightened. He thought of his own years of silence, the nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd ever be brave enough to say it out loud. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Jack's jaw clenched. You grow up in a place like ours. You learn quick. You keep your head down. Play the part. Your dad, he's a good guy, but he wouldn't get it. Nobody would. Eli wanted to argue, to say things were different now, but he knew better. Their town was a time capsule, stuck in a world where men like them were whispered about, not celebrated. He'd seen the looks, heard the slurs tossed around like casual greetings. Even now, on this empty beach, the weight of that world pressed down on them. What about you? Jack asked, turning the question back. You ever tell anyone? Eli shook his head, his throat tight. No. I couldn't. Jack nodded, like he'd expected as much. It's not easy. Never is. The silence settled again, but it wasn't uncomfortable now. It was shared, a quiet understanding that neither of them had to explain. Eli glanced at Jack, taking in the lines of his face, the way the moonlight carved shadows under his eyes. He'd always thought Jack was untouchable, the guy who had it all figured out. But now he saw the cracks decades of hiding, of carrying a truth too heavy to share. I don't know what to do, Eli admitted, his voice small. About any of this. Jack's eyes softened, and for a moment, Eli thought he might reach out, might bridge the gap between them. But instead, Jack just said, You don't have to know. Not tonight. They sat there until the stars began to fade, the first hints of dawn creeping over the horizon. Eli didn't sleep, and he doubted Jack did either. The truth was out now, raw and fragile, and neither of them knew what came next. But for the first time, Eli felt like he wasn't alone. The next morning, the air was thick with unspoken words. Eli woke to the sound of Jack packing up camp, his movements deliberate, almost mechanical. The van's tailgate was open, and Jack was shoving gear inside, his back to Eli like a wall. Eli sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The beach looked different in daylight, less like a secret and more like just another stretch of sand. But the weight of last night lingered, heavy as the fog rolling in from the ocean. You want coffee? Jack asked without turning, his voice flat. Sure, Eli said, standing. He wanted to say more, to ask if Jack regretted what he'd said, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he helped pack up, the two of them moving in a quiet rhythm, like they were both afraid to break the fragile truce. They hit the road by noon, the van rattling along the coastal highway. The radio played some old rock song, but neither of them sang along like they usually did. Eli stared out the window, watching the cliffs blur by, his mind a tangle of fear and hope. He wanted to ask Jack what came next, if this changed anything, but every time he opened his mouth, the words died. They stopped in a small town for lunch, a diner with cracked vinyl seats and a jukebox that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Jack ordered a burger. Eli got a milkshake, and they sat across from each other, the table between them feeling like a canyon. You ever think about leaving? Eli asked, stirring his shake with a straw. Like, for good. Jack's eyes flicked up, wary. Where would I go? I don't know. Somewhere. Easier. Jack snorted, but there was no humor in it. No such place. Kid. You can run, but you can't outrun yourself. Eli wanted to argue, to say there were places where people like them could be free, but he wasn't sure he believed it himself. He'd seen the news, the protests, the politicians screaming about family values. Even in cities, it wasn't always safe. But sitting here, across from Jack, he wanted to believe there was somewhere they could both belong. The rest of the day passed in a blur of gas stations and winding roads. By nightfall, they'd found another beach to camp on, this one busier, with families and surfers dotting the shore. They set up their tent in silence, the tension between them thick enough to choke on. Eli couldn't take it anymore. As Jack started the fire, he blurted, "Are we just gonna pretend last night didn't happen?" Jack froze, the match in his hand burning down to his fingers. He cursed, shaking it out, then looked at Eli, his face a mix of frustration and something softer. "What do you want me to say, Eli?" "That I'm sorry. That I didn't mean it." "I just want to know what it means," Eli said, his voice shaking. "For you. For us." Jack's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Eli thought he'd shut down again. But then Jack sighed, running a hand over his face. "It means I'm scared. Okay. I'm scared of what this does to me. To you. To everything." Eli's heart twisted. He took a step closer, close enough to feel the heat from the fire between them. "I'm scared too," he said. "But I don't want to keep pretending." Jack's eyes locked on his, and for a moment, the world fell away. Then Jack looked down, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't do this, Eli. Not here. Not now." But as the fire crackled and the waves roared, Eli knew one thing for sure. He wasn't ready to let this go. The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Eli and Jack moved through their routine driving, eating, camping, but every moment was charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. They didn't talk about that night again, but it was there in every glance, every accidental brush of hands, every silence that stretched too long. Eli felt like he was unraveling. He'd spent so long hiding who he was. And now, with Jack, it was like the walls he'd built were crumbling. He caught himself watching Jack more than he should, how he drove with one hand on the wheel, how his laugh softened when he talked about old memories, how his eyes crinkled when he smiled. It was dangerous, this wanting, but Eli couldn't stop. One evening, they stopped at a pier in a bustling coastal town, the kind of place where tourists crowded the boardwalk, eating cotton candy and snapping selfies. Eli leaned against the railing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Jack stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You ever been in love?" Eli asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Jack's head snapped toward him, surprise flickering across his face. He didn't answer right away, just stared out at the water, his hands gripping the railing. "Once," he said finally. "A long time ago." Eli's stomach twisted. "What happened?" Jack's jaw tightened. "Didn't work out. He couldn't handle it. Neither could I." Eli's breath caught. It was the first time Jack had said it so plainly, and it hit Eli like a wave. He wanted to ask more who, when, why, but the look on Jack's face stopped him. There was pain there, old and deep, and Eli didn't want to dig it up. Instead, he said, "I've never been in love." "Not really." Jack turned to him, his eyes softening. "You will. You're young. You've got time." But Eli didn't want time. He wanted now. He wanted Jack. The thought was reckless, impossible, but it burned in him, brighter than the sunset. That night, they didn't camp. Jack splurged on a motel room, a rare luxury after weeks in the van. The room was small, with 2 twin beds and a flickering TV. Eli lay awake, listening to Jack's steady breathing from the other bed, his mind racing. He wanted to cross the room, to say something, to do something, but fear held him back. The next morning, Jack was quieter than usual, his eyes shadowed. They hit the road again, heading south, the ocean always on their right. Eli tried to focus on the scenery, but his thoughts kept circling back to Jack. To the way he'd said he. To the way he'd looked at Eli on the pier, like he was seeing something he'd been searching for his whole life. By mid-afternoon, they stopped at a lighthouse, its white tower stark against the stormy sky. The wind was fierce, whipping Eli's hair into his eyes as they climbed the spiral stairs to the top. From there, the world felt endless ocean stretching to infinity, clouds heavy with the promise of rain. Jack leaned against the railing, his flannel flapping in the wind. "This is it. You know," he said, his voice almost lost in the gusts. "The edge of everything." Eli looked at him, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Jack's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. "This trip. You. Me. It's the closest I've ever come to being honest." Eli's breath hitched. He took a step closer, the wind pushing them together. "Then be honest," he said, his voice trembling. "Right now?" Jack's face was a storm of emotions, fear, longing, something fierce and desperate. For a moment, Eli thought he might close the distance, might finally let go. But then Jack turned away, his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. "We can't," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't." Eli's heart sank, but he didn't push. Not yet. The truth was out there, fragile and flickering, and he wasn't ready to let it die. The rain came that night, a downpour that turned the world to static. They were back in the van, parked at a rest stop, the windows fogging with their breath. Eli sat in the passenger seat, his knees pulled to his chest, listening to the rain hammer the roof. Jack was in the back, sprawled on a sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling like it held all the answers. The silence was unbearable. Eli couldn't take it anymore. "Jack," he said, turning to face him. "Why do you keep pushing me away?" Jack's eyes flicked to him, then away. "I'm not pushing you away. I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" Eli's voice rose, sharp with frustration. "From you. From this." Jack sat up, his face tight. "From everything. Eli. You're 19. You've got your whole life ahead of you. I'm a mess. I've been hiding for so long, I don't even know who I am anymore." Eli's chest ached. He climbed into the back, sitting across from Jack, their knees almost touching. "You're not a mess," he said. "You're the only person who's ever made me feel like I'm not alone." Jack's breath hitched, his eyes locking on Eli's. For a moment, neither of them moved, the rain a deafening roar around them. Then Jack leaned forward, his hand reaching out, hesitating just before it touched Eli's face. "Eli," he whispered, his voice raw. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I do," Eli said, his heart pounding. "I know exactly what I want." The air between them crackled, electric and alive. Jack's hand finally landed, his fingers brushing Eli's cheek, soft and tentative. Eli leaned into the touch, his eyes closing, his whole body trembling with the weight of it. This was the moment he'd been chasing, the truth he'd been too scared to name. But then Jack pulled back, his hand falling to his side. We can't, he said, his voice breaking. Your dad, he'd never forgive me. And you deserve better than this. Eli's eyes snapped open, anger flaring. Don't tell me what I deserve. I'm not a kid. Jack. I know what I feel. Jack's face crumpled, like he was fighting a war inside himself. You think this is easy for me? You think I don't want this? His voice cracked, raw and desperate. I've spent my whole life running from this, Eli. And now you're here. And it's like I can't breathe. Eli's heart twisted. He reached out, grabbing Jack's hand, holding it tight. Then stop running, he said. Just stop. For a moment, Jack didn't move, his hand warm in Eli's. Then he pulled away, standing abruptly, his breath ragged. I need air, he muttered, and before Eli could stop him, he was out the door, disappearing into the rain. Eli sat there, alone in the van, the sound of the storm drowning out everything else. He wanted to chase after Jack, to demand answers, but something told him to wait. This wasn't over not yet. Jack didn't come back for hours. Eli sat in the van, the rain slowing to a drizzle, his mind a storm of its own. He replayed every moment of the trip, the glances, the silences, the way Jack's hand had felt on his cheek. He wanted to be angry, to hate Jack for pulling away, but all he felt was ache. Ache for Jack, for himself, for the life they could have if they were brave enough. When Jack finally returned, soaked to the bone, his eyes were red, like he'd been crying or fighting something only he could see. He climbed into the van without a word, grabbing a towel from the back and wiping his face. Where'd you go? Eli asked, his voice soft. Jack didn't look at him, just needed to think. Eli's chest tightened. About what? Jack's hand stilled, the towel dangling from his fingers. About you, he said finally. About what happens if I let this happen. Eli's heart pounded. He slid closer, the sleeping bag crinkling beneath him. What happens? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jack's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. Everything changes. Eli. Your dad. My life. Your life, it all falls apart. Maybe it's supposed to, Eli said, his voice fierce. Maybe it's supposed to fall apart so we can build something better. Jack's breath hitched, and for a moment, Eli thought he saw a crack in the wall Jack had built around himself. But then Jack shook his head, his voice low. You don't get it. I'm 35. I've got nothing to offer you. You're just starting out. And I'm already broken. Eli's eyes stung. He reached out, grabbing Jack's wrist, holding it tight. You're not broken, he said. You're the only thing that feels real to me. Jack's face crumpled, and for a moment, Eli thought he might break. But then Jack pulled his wrist free, standing abruptly. Get some sleep, he said, his voice rough. We've got a long drive tomorrow. Eli didn't sleep. He lay awake, listening to Jack's uneven breathing, his mind racing. He didn't know how to reach Jack, how to make him see that this whatever it was worth fighting for. But he wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, they packed up in silence, the air heavy with everything unsaid. They drove south, the ocean always there, a constant reminder of that night on the beach. Eli stole glances at Jack, searching for a sign, any sign, that he wasn't alone in this. By evening, they reached a small town with a boardwalk carnival, all bright lights and the smell of popcorn. Jack suggested they stop, maybe to break the tension, maybe to pretend things were normal. They wandered through the crowd, playing games, eating greasy fries. For a moment, it felt like they were just two guys on a road trip, not two people carrying a secret that could change everything. But as they stood at the edge of the boardwalk, watching the Ferris wheel spin against the night sky, Eli couldn't hold it in anymore. "I don't want to go back," he said, his voice shaking. "Not to the way things were." Jack's eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything. Eli took a step closer, his heart pounding. "I'm not asking for forever," he said. "I'm just asking for now." Jack's breath caught, and for a moment, Eli thought he might finally give in. But then Jack turned away, his voice low. "Let's go," he said. "It's getting late." Eli's heart sank, but he followed, the lights of the carnival fading behind them. He didn't know what came next, but he knew one thing. He wasn't ready to let Jack go. The final days of the trip were a blur of highways and silence. Eli felt like he was holding his breath, waiting for something to break. Jack was quieter than ever, his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. They were heading back to Idaho now, the ocean giving way to endless fields and small towns. Eli's stomach churned at the thought of going home, of slipping back into the life he'd been trying to escape. He didn't know how to face his dad, how to pretend everything was the same when it wasn't. On their last night, they camped by a lake, the water still and dark under a sky full of stars. Jack built a fire, and they sat across from each other, the flames casting shadows on their faces. Eli couldn't take the silence anymore. "Jack," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "What happens when we go back?" Jack's eyes flicked up, then away. "We go back to how things were." Eli's heart sank. "And what?" "Pretend this never happened." Jack's jaw tightened. "It's not about pretending. It's about surviving." Eli stood, his hands shaking. "I don't want to survive. I want to live." Jack looked at him, his eyes raw with something Eli couldn't name. "You think I don't? You think I haven't spent my whole life wishing I could? Then do something about it," Eli said, his voice breaking. "Be honest. With me. With yourself. With my dad. Stop hiding." Jack stood, the firelight flickering across his face. "You don't know what you're asking, Eli. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. And you don't know what it's like to have nothing." Eli shot back. "I've been hiding my whole life, Jack. And then you came along, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. Don't take that away from me." Jack's breath hitched, and for a moment, Eli thought he saw tears in his eyes. Then Jack stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His hands cupped Eli's face, his touch gentle but firm, and before Eli could process it, Jack kissed him. The world stopped. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper, desperate, like they were both drowning and this was the only way to survive. Eli's hands found Jack's waist, pulling him closer, the fire warm against their skin. It was everything he'd wanted, everything he'd been too scared to hope for. When they finally pulled apart, Jack's forehead rested against Eli's, his breath ragged. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so damn sorry." "Don't be," Eli said, his voice trembling. "Just don't stop." Jack's laugh was shaky, almost a sob. "You make it sound so easy." "It can be," Eli said, his hands tightening on Jack's waist. "We can figure it out. Together." Jack pulled back, his eyes searching Eli's. "Your dad, he's my best friend. If he finds out, then we tell him," Eli said, his voice fierce. "We tell him the truth. And if he can't handle it, that's on him." Jack's face softened, and for the first time, Eli saw something like hope in his eyes. "You're braver than me, kid." Eli smiled, his heart full. "Maybe. But I learned it from you." They stood there, wrapped in each other, the fire dying to embers. The road ahead was uncertain. Eli knew his dad might not understand, that their town might never accept them. But in that moment, with Jack's arms around him and the stars above, he felt something he hadn't in years, free. The next morning, they packed up and drove home. The silence between them no longer heavy but warm, filled with possibility. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And for now, that was enough.